As shown in this graph, starting in 2020 to today, gambling in global sports betting markets has rose by an alarming rate and is expected to continue growing over the following years. This negatively impacts American families as a whole because it increases yearly spending habits. Our research question is, in what way does the deception of gambling advertisements in sports betting across the United States negatively impact American families across the 21st century? I'm Maria Zatola.
I'm Miranda Cordero. I'm Kylie Metzger.
And I'm Madison Gill. The consequences of the gambling addiction in sports betting are devastating. As shown in this graph by Chapagard, it is seen that the sports betting profits have increased over time. What this illustrates is that gambling has been expanding, which further affects the participation nationwide, resulting in a sports betting revenue surge. Based on Business Insider, an anonymous interviewee confesses he became addicted to gambling after the legalization of it by his state. In 2022, he bet over $200,000 across legalized forms of gambling platforms, including DraftKings and FanDuel. In 2021, he bet over $200,000 across these forms of gambling platforms. His daily wager could amount to up to $5,000, and at times he turned as little as $2,500 into over $30,000 in winnings. However, as fun as this practice was, he noticed his mood depending on the outcomes of his bets and how it began to impact his relationships with family members. He couldn't even read his own child a book without monitoring the status of his bets. He remembered the day he got addicted like it was yesterday. The 34-year-old told Insider, "I remember that exact moment. I'm crazy, this is not great, but sometimes gambling addiction gets you to do crazy things." He claimed that gambling took over his life and that it was a way to lose your life savings over your phone. Business Insider reporter Jacob Zinkula backed up his findings with claims from Timothy Fong, a co-director of the UCLA Gambling Studies, and DraftKings and FanDuel themselves. This relates to our first point. Excessive gambling causes severe financial and emotional distress, leading to family dysfunction. As illustrated by scholarly supported Catherine Tulloch and her colleagues, gambling advertisements often exploit emotional vulnerabilities, portraying gambling as a quick solution to financial problems, which can mislead families into believing they can easily win money. The main targets that suffer the greatest impact are low-income individuals. This puts even more financial hardship on them and leads to strain within family dynamics. As shown in this graph from the Council on Compulsive Gambling of New Jersey, it is seen that the cycle of problem gambling affects more generations than one, making it a repetitive issue. Financial problems, damaged relationships, learned behaviors, and the emotional and physical toll all develop an impact on the individual forever.
Excessive gambling causes family dysfunction. Gambling, in most cases, isn't a one-and-done deal. Since most gamblers are either moderate or high risk, as shown by the graph, it is more common for them to gain the correlates of problem gambling. This includes insomnia, alcohol dependence, drug misuse, antisocial behavior, and as previously mentioned, family dysfunction. These are all influenced by these three factors. Peer influence. According to expert Alvin Dura, most behaviors are learned through observation and social reinforcement. His research suggests that people learn new behaviors based on models who are seen as influential or authoritative. Companies use this to their advantage by tapping in on this technique. Emotional vulnerability and financial stress. Marketing tactics manipulate the usage of excessive gambling and exploit the emotional vulnerabilities of the population. The financial disruption this leads to cause feelings of regret, despair, and stress, ruining family relationships. Family dysfunction and relationship strain. The severity of gambling has been positively associated with divorce, childhood maltreatment, stress, and greater family dysfunction, which motivates people to lie about their true extracurricular activities. Our second point being, gambling advertisements and increased accessibility normalize gambling behavior, leading to higher rates of addiction. In only 4 years, the percentage of people who seek for help only keeps rising in a concerning and shocking rate. Problem gamblers have an issue, and they have started to acknowledge it and overcome it. But with the increasing number of these individuals who seek for help, it also reveals the amount of people who are addicted to gambling. The main focus needs to be on the struggling individuals to form a healthy society. A new Ipsos poll has found that 8% of Americans have placed official bets on live sports betting events, with the most being 8% on online or an app, 4% in person, and 3% in esports bet events. The most famous leagues being 59% the NFL and 25% horse racing. People and Americans keep betting on these leagues, and gambling advertisements only motivate these activities. We need to stop these and regulate these so these people can seek for help, find it, and we can help inform a healthy society.
Social influences and psychological triggers contribute to the escalation of gambling behaviors, creating self-reinforcing cycles of addiction. A study done by the University of Leverage by Dr. Lee and his assistant shows that couple arguments and gambling addictions feed into each other, creating a cycle that keeps getting worse and worse and worse. Another study that was done by the professor of psychology, Liliana Tay, also shows that, on average, 9% of individuals have reported that most of their time spent gambling was actually done at the work office. This suggests that gambling can become a huge distraction and lead to a lot of financial issues. As you can see from this graph, it shows the cycles of addiction and the leading factors: chronic stress and anxiety, chronic substance use, and repeated gambling. All these factors lead to the self-destroying cycle of gambling. Psychological triggers create self-reinforcing cycles of addiction. Legalization of sports bettings. With mobile gaming apps, online casinos, gambling has become more accessible than ever before, with access to gambling from anywhere in the world as long as you have an internet connection. What this does is portray gambling as a fun game while the real problems of it are hidden from the public view. Financial instability. As losses from gambling adds on, this actually may only encourage gamblers to continue gambling in an attempt to recover from their losses. What this does is allow gamblers to become in a cycle of financial hardship, and this can create unhealthy habits. Escalating cycles of addiction. Research has shown that pop-up messages, such as billboards or advertisements, can actually trigger past gamblers. What this does is allow gamblers to fall back into old unhealthy habits. As you can see here, these are some of the ways you can diagnose yourself to see if you're a problem gambler. Here are some of the questions you can ask yourself. Do I use gambling as an escape? Am I in denial about my problem? Do I withdraw from family relationships? All these questions are great ways to diagnose yourself and start developing healthier habits and healthier routines.
3 solutions we have came up with today are pop-up messages. Pop-up messages show up as soon as you enter a gambling website, and they allow gamblers to stop and rethink about their actions. Another solution we came up with is learning about the risks early on. Education is a huge part of our future, and if we stay educated about the risks of gambling, we will be able to be smart with our money and not get manipulated by marketing tactics. Third solution is regulation of gambling advertisements. This would require gambling companies to show the risks of gambling and not only the benefits. This would also limit the amount of gambling advertisements shown so fewer public gets it. We have also came up with 3 limitations to show you that even our solutions aren't fully effective. The first limitation is when people gain confidence in their gambling abilities, it's hard to stop. If somebody thinks they have mastered gambling, they're going to be willing to risk more in order to win more. Then, gambling advertisements telling them the risks aren't going to affect them since their confidence is going to overtake their logic. Our second limitation is growing up in a gambling environment increases susceptibility to risky behavior. If you were brought up in an environment full of gamblers and addicts, that is all you were going to know. So a message telling you the risks of that wouldn't affect you since you already know those risks. If you are getting into gambling, even being brought up around that means you don't care about those risks. Our third limitation is emerging marketing tactics. The more revenue marketing industries bring in, the more they're going to spend on their ads to bring more public into their scheme. Meaning, if a person, for an example, sees their favorite celebrity praising gambling, they're going to choose to listen to them, which are successful and rich, than to messages and pop-ups and ads telling them the risks of that. Thank you for listening.
Scooch closer. Back up though. You just came off film. Okay, so Matt, we're gonna start with you and then we'll go across with questions. Here we go. Reflecting on your colleagues' work, which one had the greatest impact on your understanding of the problem you identified?
I would have to say most likely Kylie's, because Kylie talks about how the gambling companies use like certain advertisements to make gambling seem like it's like this great thing, so that these companies can continue to generate revenue from these people who are being tricked into that. And I did not know that about sports betting, so it was really informative.
Okay. Next up. What's an example of a compelling argument from one of your peers' reports that you decided not to use, and why didn't you use it?
One compelling argument that we decided not to really use would probably be Mariana's, because she focused more on the internalness of psychology and gambling, but we did our presentation more on the external and not really the psychology lens of it.
All right, next up. What's a way in which your team's solution makes you think differently about the research you conducted?
So our solution was about learning about the risks of gambling, and I didn't think of that because all my paper was about was on how gambling would affect your family, and learning about risks early on is something very to yourself, so it wouldn't really impact anybody but yourself.
And save the best for last. Describe an argument from one of your peers' reports that makes you think differently about the solution that you guys came up with.
I believe that Maria's changed like the solution that we came up with, because hers focused on the family dynamics and how those family and how the past traumas, childhood experiences affected your view on gambling and sports betting. But our presentation really focused on how the legalization, the advertisement, and the external sources affected our view